Hey guys, so today I thought I would talk about my 74 days here in Switzerland. So I'm getting ready to leave. Um, I flew into Switzerland on July 23rd and I will be leaving on September 14th. So I will have been here like 74 days and I have mostly been in kind of the major cities of Switzerland throughout my time here. So I started my trip here in Zurich and I was there for about 2.5 weeks. And then from there, I went to a small town near Orbe, or closer to Lucerne. And I was there for over 3 weeks. And then I'm currently in Basel, Switzerland, which is in northern Switzerland. So I've kind of gotten to see a lot of the different parts of Switzerland while I've been here. And I just thought I would talk about prices, people, and pets. So I'm in Switzerland, if you haven't seen my other videos, as a house sitter. So I'm just kind of traveling using trusted house sitters and exploring different parts of the world and kind of living in places where like living locally. So I'm someone who lives in Switzerland full time. I'm in their home and with their pets. So what I knew about Switzerland before I came here was Swiss chocolate, banks, and it was expensive. So I kind of came in with that perspective that things were going to cost more. And I am from Hawaii, so I've always been kind of used to a high price of living. When I left Hawaii, I think a gallon of milk was like $7 and gas was getting pretty high. And since I've been here in Switzerland, I've noticed that kind of depending on where you are, the prices will kind of reflect that. So if you're in Zurich and you go grocery shopping in the bigger grocery stores, I think the prices are pretty affordable. If you're familiar with the prices in Pennsylvania, I think they're similar to that. But then when I was in the small town near Orbe, the only grocery store that was within half an hour of me, because I have walked and just used public transportation, that house was kind of in a village that's kind of far from everything. And from the house, the grocery store is 5 minutes, but it's a pretty small, kind of the store that you pop down to just to buy something if you kind of forgot it from the main store. But I did end up shopping there for my groceries for over 3 weeks, and it kind of makes you like pay attention to everything that you buy and kind of what you're buying. And I did enjoy shopping there because most of the things they sold were produced in the village. So the yogurt and the milk and the butter were things that were all from local cows and dairies. And then the bread was made in the bakery. The vegetables were from local farms. So the carbon footprint of all of those products were pretty small. And I think that paying a bit more was kind of an even trade for that. Since I've been here in Basel, there's a grocery store 8 minutes away, so that is a lot nicer. It's a Migros, so that is one of the larger grocery stores, and it's multi-leveled. The bottom level is the grocery floor, and I've been able to get a lot more fruits since I've been here than I have in the past. Than I have at other grocery stores. There's a big and larger selection, and it's kind of cool to see like what fruits and vegetables are more commonly sold. So there's a lot of plums and peaches and berries and grapes and melons here, and I think that's pretty cool, kind of like to see those as like the main fruits. And apples they have, but not as much, and bananas, and there aren't that many oranges. Those are kind of secondary, where I think in the States, when we think of fruits, we immediately think of apples, bananas, and oranges. But here it seems to be like peaches, plums, and grapes that are more common. So that was a pretty interesting difference. And then another big price with Switzerland is the public transportation. So you can get a Swiss Rail card, but those can be a couple $100s. But if you're only here for a couple days or a week, that would make sense because you'd be using the card every day and it would kind of work and pay itself off, because with a Swiss Rail card you get free entry into a lot of the larger museums. But I felt with how I was traveling, I'm not doing big large train journeys every day. I'm staying in one place for 3 weeks at a time and just kind of exploring the area. And a lot of days I've kind of just been working, so it's just been kind of nice to not have to like worry about that. The train that I am from where I am in Arselheim to Basel SBB, it's about 25 minutes by train, and it's about 370 one way. So that's not too bad considering how long you're on the train. It's 17 stops. So every other minute the train is stopping and you can get on and off. And that works out pretty well for exploring around here. So price, if you're not driving, the public transportation is quite high if you're traveling between big cities. When I came from where I was near Lucerne to Basel, I think it was about $70. And on the larger trains, like on the smaller trains, they don't usually check if you have your ticket, but on the larger trains, they do. So when I was coming from Lucerne to Basel, it was a pretty large train. I had to switch a train 3 times, but on the 2 trains they asked to see my ticket and then they asked to see my passport, which I thought that was kind of weird because that's never happened before. They've never asked for my passport when they've checked my ticket before. I was kind of like, this is odd. And I don't know if maybe it was something about that day, because the day that I was moving houses is the day that the German railways were on strike, so I was kind of lucky I didn't kind of get stuck 3 hours from where I was supposed to be. So getting the Swiss Railways app, I think it's SBB or something similar to that, that's very helpful because then you can just buy your ticket on your phone and you don't have to worry about paying cash at the machines, because sometimes they're broken and sometimes you don't have change or coins that'll work. So the app I think is just super helpful, and you can also look up times and it will tell you delays, so that's pretty good. I would trust the app over Google Maps because Google Maps will say if a train is delayed. But one day I was in Geneva and I was heading back to the home. I was going to my home for that period of time, and the train said it was delayed by 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, that's good, because the bus I was on ended up being late. And I was like, oh, that works out pretty well. And as soon as I was walking up the steps to the platform and I got to the top, I saw the train that wasn't supposed to be there and leaving for 5 more minutes pulling off. I saw the last car go and I was just like, no. I would have ran if I knew. If I was only a minute or 2 sooner, I would have got that train. I ended up having to wait for 45 minutes for the next one. So that's something to be aware of when you're planning, is the trains, some of them come on a pretty regular schedule, but usually it's a half an hour, an hour between a train, so you'll have to kind of plan around that. And then I can talk about the people. So in Zurich, that is the German-speaking part of Switzerland. So there, people speak German as their main language, but English is a language that most people also know. So if you don't know German, like I don't know German, if you ask someone if they speak English after like you do your polite introductions, and I've noticed that in the German speaking parts of Switzerland, they're more likely to speak English than in the French speaking parts. So in Zurich, cashiers, people in cafes, on the trains are more likely to speak English. And the woman that I house sat for, she grew up in Switzerland, but her mother was from England, so she actually had an English accent. I was like, oh, how long have you been in Switzerland? Because I thought she moved here, and she's like, oh, I was born and raised here. I'm like, well, you sound English. She's very nice. And then the second place I house sat was in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. And in that village, I would walk the dog a couple times a day. And every time like people would talk to me, I would have these conversations with them, but they only spoke French. And so I was just nodding politely a lot and saying oui, oui, or désolé, désolé if the dogs were acting up. And it worked out pretty well. And the people are very kind and friendly where I was, and that was an overall good experience. And now I'm back in the German-speaking part of Switzerland in Basel, and people here do speak English, but they're kind of more hesitant, I've noticed here, than they are in Zurich. I don't know if it's maybe not as touristy, but it's kind of an interesting difference just moving between these three different sections of Switzerland, kind of their connection with the English language and how they kind of feel comfortable with it. The lady that I'm house sitting for, she's originally from Poland, so her first language is Polish, but she's able to have we were able to have a conversation over dinner the first night I was here in English, but she also studied in Italy, so she speaks multiple languages, and it was just kind of really cool to hear her perspective about her education and all the languages she's had to learn and use. And then the pets, which is kind of my a main part of my life here in Switzerland and as a house sitter. So I have watched 6 cats and a dog since I've been here, separated over 3 different places. So the cats I've noticed are largely outside cats, even in the cities. They have cat doors or they go in and out all the time. I feel like in the States, having inside cats, especially in the cities or even in the country, is a lot more common. But here, the cats are a lot freer and they can go out and be gone for days and then come back completely fine. And that was kind of something that made me nervous at first. And then dogs here, in certain parts of Switzerland, there are no leash laws. So I know in the United States, or at least the parts that I've been, leash laws is kind of a big thing where a dog needs to be on a leash if you're walking it in a public space, just kind of for liability issues. But here that isn't as necessary. So if you're in the country like I was with the dog, he could be walked with or without a leash and it'd be completely fine. Of course, he would have to wear it in the village and in certain like nature preserves, but in other parts it wouldn't be necessary. And it's just kind of a culture shock, I think, for me, that, and it was like a culture shock for me that dogs weren't required to have a leash on. And the woman I was house sitting for with her dog, she was talking to me about it. She's like, I think leashes on dogs are a form of animal abuse. And I'm like, wow. And she's like, yeah, they constrict the dogs and don't let them live naturally. And I'm like, that's a really interesting perspective that you have. And I was able to kind of learn and see like the dog walking culture in Switzerland. Yeah, that's what I thought of Switzerland. I've had a really nice time here. There's a lot of culture there's a lot of access to not only museums and galleries and restaurants and different foods, but also the public transportation is very reliable and very accessible for buying tickets through your phone. And there's places in the stations and machines where you can buy tickets. Accessibility, though, for walking if you have a disability, I don't think is something that Switzerland is that great about. I think you have better luck in the cities, but I have noticed that the sidewalks end abruptly, or there's obstacles on sidewalks. So if you're in a wheelchair or on crutches, you'd have a difficult time. A lot of the stores are multi-level in the city. So in Basil's shopping street, I noticed that the H&M was 3 levels, and the elevator and the escalators only went from the first to the second level. To get to the 3rd level, you would have to go upstairs. So you wouldn't, if you couldn't go up the stairs. So if you're in a wheelchair or you stairs are something that is very hard for your body to do, or you're not able to do, you wouldn't have been able to go to the 3rd floor of that building and shop. So I think that's kind of something that it's just important to know if you're going to be visiting Switzerland and you have issues like that. I know my mom, if she was here, she would have a lot of issues walking and getting around because of inaccessibilities like that, with sidewalks that end, access. Some of the public transportation only have access through stairs, no elevators or ramps. So that's something to keep in mind. Some of the trains I had noticed don't have some wheelchair access, but not all of them. One of them was like tiny staircase straight up, and I was like, this is very difficult, and my feet work fine. So I thought I would just throw that in. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a nice week, and I will talk to you later. Bye.